All right. If you guys didn't see on the last one, for some reason, the last couple times my videos have been cut off. So hopefully this one doesn't either. But I wanted to finish up where what I was talking about in regards to conflict perspective and the women's movement. I believe I was at that last part there where we're talking about when you look at the bullets of the different things and what the focus of those were to change that balance in power. Okay. And that is what a lot of those bullet points there, that's kind of those play into, there's layers to every single one of these bullet points, but the description of those plays into how that helped change that balance of power. Okay. These were effects of the change in the balance of power. Okay. And then and looking at those last two, so if we talk about functionalist theory and then conflict perspective, is one better than the other? Or when we look at all three, because we're going to look at the other one here soon too, is one better than the other? Not so much, but I'd say functionalist, I think, explains cooperation in society better. Okay, and how we cooperate. If you think about what it does, talking about these different parts and how they work together to help us function. And while conflict does a good job of showing how we don't cooperate sometimes in society, and it shows those parts of conflict that we have, and it probably does a better job of explaining that when looking at how different groups are trying to obtain power or change the balance of power. Okay, so hopefully that helps out a little bit, and that'll clear that up and make what your assignment is a little bit easier after hearing that. So let's skip this. Now, what you have here, I have this box, and I want you to think of if you had to write 1 to 3 words of what all of these mean. Okay, so in 1 to 3 words, what does this mean? In 1 to 3 words, what does this mean? In 1 to 3 words, what does this mean? Here and here, as you look at these. Just want to digest that there for a second. Okay. Now, with that being said, how many of you think you put somewhere, all of you, in a somewhat similar meaning to all of this? Probably with most of them, I'm going to assume you guys apply similar meaning to all of these. This one could be tricky. Okay. But if we're looking at just what it is as opposed to the meaning, obviously we know what that is. All right. Now, this is what we're going for the third perspective. We're going to talk about symbolic interactionism. And symbolic interactionism focuses on the interactions among people based on mutually understood symbols. And what is a symbol in our society? It's something that stands for or represents something else. And the examples I give, these could be objects, words, gestures, facial expressions, sounds. All right. And for the most part, we all attach very similar meanings to all of these. Okay. Especially words. I know that sometimes there's a divide amongst generations. Generations create new words. Okay. And that always makes the older people upset with this new word. I don't even know what that means. I don't know what they're saying. But that's not, I mean, big picture, that's not what we're talking about here. Okay. So symbolic interaction is going to focus on how this works. Okay. And think about this. Here's an example I give. If you're driving, all right, and you come to a red light, all right, what do? All right. I'm assuming the majority of you, 99.99% of the time, you stop. Maybe some of you have run a red light before. Why do you stop? Okay. Several reasons. First off, your safety, the safety of others. All right. Another reason. Okay. You don't want a ticket. Okay. And those right there are pretty much it. Now, let's say that you go to a different country and they don't have red lights. Okay. What you don't know is that you just stop at every intersection, everybody stops, but there's no signs. Okay? But you wouldn't do that. As time progressed, you'd probably talk to people, you'd figure it out as you drove, maybe if after a few accidents, and you'd figure that out. And you'd be able to adapt within that culture. Think about this. What if you go to a foreign country and the middle finger does not mean what it means here? So let's say that you have a little bit of road rage and you're driving around, and your number one thing to go to when you have road rage is you just flick people off. Okay? You don't yell anything, you don't say anything, you just flick people off. But you notice that every time you flick somebody off, they smile. And you're like, why are these people smiling as I flick them off? Okay? And before you know it, you realize, me flicking these people off during my road rage they're not understanding the symbol that I'm passing on to them. Okay? While in the United States, if you flick somebody off, everybody knows, okay, pretty much what that means. All right, that's a derogatory symbol to somebody where they're like, you know what? Same to you. They might flick you off back or yell back, or who knows what that incident results in. Okay, so within cultures and societies, we have these mutually understood symbols, and they talk about this being the way that we function. But it goes a little bit deeper than that with some of the stuff too, and we'll talk about that here in a second. Excuse me. So 3 basic assumptions with this theory. We learn the meaning of a symbol by the ways we see others reacting to it. All right, like I said, the example I already gave you. We're going to learn the meaning of that symbol in that other culture real quick when we realize that they're not upset with this. All right, and then once we learn the meaning, we base our behaviors on them. Now, let me give you something a little bit different here. So let's go a little bit further just into this theory. They talk about, like, in this theory, that without symbols, that our lives would be no more sophisticated than that of animals. All right. Like, without symbols, we would have no aunts or uncles, employers or teachers, or even this idea of brothers or sisters. It'd all be family. Okay. It sounds a little strange, but it's the symbols that define those relationships. So we'd still have, like, obviously reproduction would still be around, but we wouldn't have the symbols to tell us how we are related to whom. We would not know who is it that we owe respect and obligations to. Who do we expect privileges from? So we're talking about parents in this, and this still happens somewhat in the animal kingdom. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it's a little bit more loosely tied with some of the things that you might see. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you've fallen in love, and finally it's the night before your wedding. So you're sitting there contemplating the date for the next day, and your mother comes to you in tears. She's crying. She tells you that she had a child before she married your father, and a child that she gave up for adoption. And then she says that she just discovered the individual that you are about to marry is that child. All right. Now, yes, there's some drama. That's a made for TV. I don't know if that's a comedy or a dramedy. I don't know what you want to call that type of movie. But at the end of the day, I bet you're now no longer getting married. Okay. Why is that? Okay. Because the symbols that we attach to this, all right, we immediately, every single person that probably just heard this there is like, oh, that's disgusting, right? So, but the idea that in our culture, that would have been so wrong. If you remove all symbols and nobody knows a lot of this stuff outside of that basic family there and these names that we attach to it, it might be a different story, okay? All right. We use the meaning of symbols to imagine how others will respond to our behaviors. Okay, so we visualize before we act. We typically don't just walk up to someone and punch them in the face for no reason. Okay, we realize that that would be a problem. All right, we think about things before we do because of symbolism, knowing the behaviors that would be associated with what you do. And they talk about this dramaturgy, which is human interaction as theatrical performance. And they're saying if you look at the people around you, they use dress and gestures to attract the attention of those whose attention they are seeking. And so we go through this process of the presentation of self, which presentation of self, by definition, is the way people try to make a favorable impression of themselves in the minds of others. And we do this all the time. Okay. There are moments I know that we don't care as much, but oftentimes when we get up in the morning and we put our clothes on and we comb our hair and we do these things, a little bit of it is for us, but a lot of it is for others though too. And we do what is called impression management. We manage how people are going to view us oftentimes. But there is some, there's some benefit to that also. So we think of that as such a negative thing, but that leads us to possibly job opportunities. It leads us to different relationships. If you, and you can put yourself out there any sort of way. If you want to put yourself out there as an artist in whether it be visual arts, okay, but all these different ways, you may present yourself different. If you want to put yourself out there as a hard worker, what is the impression that we put out there? How do I show people I'm a hard worker? Okay. You obviously work hard. Okay. What does that look like depending on what arena that you're actually in? Okay. So hopefully you have an idea of what symbolic interactionism is and how we attach meaning. Now, your guys' assignment is going to be, and I'll explain it a little bit to you here. You're going to try to use these three theories, okay, in explaining, all right, to the U.S. divorce rate. So how would a symbolic interactionist, okay, explain the U.S. divorce rate and its changes? Okay, how would functional analysis or functionalist, okay, how would they explain the U.S. divorce rate? All right. And then last, how would a conflict theorist explain the U.S. divorce rate? So you're going to use some of these basic ideas to do your best. So obviously conflict is going to describe it using some sort of conflict. Functionalist, okay, might look at the different sectors of society when doing this. So I want you to apply that idea. And then symbolic interaction might look at the actual symbolism behind marriage and how that has changed. So I want you to apply those ideas, okay, to the U.S. divorce rate, and you're going to write 3 separate paragraphs explaining how this happens. So that is attached. If you have any questions, let me know. All right, and obviously all the notes are attached, and they're here too for you guys to reference. And you can reference outside sources. There might be some stuff out there on this. I don't want you to actually, copy and paste anything. Obviously, I want you to apply your ideas, but really apply what you know of the theory to this assignment. All right.